Have you ever stopped to think, with absolute honesty, why, even after finally achieving what you wanted so badly and fought so hard for, happiness seems to slip through your fingers like fine sand? Why does the new job, the dream relationship, the long-awaited purchase never seem to completely fill the inner void? And why, right after achieving something important, are you already mentally chasing the next thing, the next goal, the next desire? For Arthur Schopenhauer, one of the most disturbing and honest philosophers who ever lived, these anguishing questions aren't just trivial signs of personal dissatisfaction or lack of gratitude. They reveal something much deeper and more frightening: the true nature of human existence. He believed, with unshakable conviction, that desiring isn't just an inevitable part of life. Desiring in itself is suffering. And fully understanding this, accepting this brutal truth without running from it, can radically and permanently change how you see yourself, others, and the entire world. Schopenhauer built his entire philosophy on a radical and deeply disturbing idea. At the root of everything that exists, there's a blind, irrational, and completely insatiable force that he called the will. This isn't will in the common sense of the word. It's not that conscious decision you make when you choose to drink coffee or leave the house. The will, with a capital W, is something much bigger and much more frightening. It's a metaphysical energy that runs through all of reality. It's in the plants that stretch toward the light. It's in the animals that hunt to survive. And it's in you, who wake up every day hungry, thirsty, with the desire to be loved, recognized, protected, safe. This force has no final objective. It has no reason to exist. It simply wants, without stopping, without purpose, without ever being completely satisfied. And it's precisely this absence of meaning, this lack of an ultimate end, that makes life so painful. Because every time you desire something, what's really happening isn't you exercising your freedom. It's the will using you as an instrument to keep on wanting. You're not as in control of your life as you imagine. You're just a channel through which this blind energy manifests. A temporary vehicle for a force that existed before you were born and will continue existing after you die. And because it's never satisfied, you're never satisfied either. It doesn't matter what you achieve. It doesn't matter how many goals you reach. The will always demand more. It will always create new desires. It will always keep you moving. Pain, then, doesn't come from outside. It's not caused by bad external circumstances. It comes from within. It's structural. It's inherent to the very act of existing. As long as you're alive, as long as there's a body that feels and a mind that thinks, there will be desire. And where there's desire, there's suffering. Now think honestly about how the cycle of desire works in your own life. First, you feel the lack of something. It could be a material object. It could be a person. It could be a professional achievement. It could be social recognition. It could be anything. But the lack hurts. It generates restlessness. It generates anxiety. It generates an uncomfortable and persistent sensation of incompleteness. You feel there's a hole inside you, and that this hole will only be filled when you get what you desire. So you set out in pursuit. You work. You plan. You make an effort. You make sacrifices. The pursuit occupies your mind. It moves you. It gets you out of bed every day. It gives you a temporary sense of purpose. And finally, after much effort, you achieve it. There's a brief moment of relief, of pleasure, of victory. You feel it was worth it. That now, yes, you're complete. But this moment doesn't last long. Not long at all. Soon, what was once so desired loses its shine. The new job becomes routine in weeks. The relationship that seemed perfect reveals its flaws and limitations. The purchase you waited for so long gets stored in the closet and forgotten. The new becomes common. The special becomes banal. The extraordinary becomes ordinary. And then, without you consciously noticing, without you admitting it out loud, the lack returns. That hole that seemed filled opens up again. That emptiness that seemed resolved comes back with full force. Now you want something else. another better job, with a higher salary, with more prestige, another more exciting relationship, more perfect, more satisfying, another more modern object, more expensive, more impressive, another bigger achievement that validates your existence. And the cruel cycle starts over from zero. Schopenhauer saw in this an absolutely diabolical trap with no escape, because the average human being lives completely trapped in this perpetual movement with no clear way out. Desire, pursuit, conquest, emptiness, new desire, and again, and again, and again, until death. There's no true escape within the internal logic of the will. Each momentary satisfaction is just the inevitable prelude to a new lack. Each celebrated conquest is just the secret beginning of a new desperate race. And the more you feed this vicious cycle, the stronger and more demanding it becomes. The will grows with what you give it. You're not walking toward lasting happiness. You're spinning in circles that get faster and tighter. And each turn wears you down a little more deeply, empties you a little more completely, leaves you more existentially tired, more frustrated with life, more lost about what really matters. What most people call happiness, Schopenhauer called illusion, because pleasure for him is never something positive in itself. It's not a real presence of something good. It's just the temporary absence of pain. Think about hunger. When you're hungry, you feel discomfort, weakness, irritation, a real physical pain that dominates your attention. Eating relieves this. It brings satisfaction. But this satisfaction isn't a new and luminous state of joy. It's just the suspension of the pain of hunger. It's just the relief from suffering that was present. And soon it returns. In a few hours, you'll be hungry again, and you'll have to eat again. Forever. The same goes for everything. Thirst, tiredness, loneliness, sexual desire, cold, heat. All these states are forms of pain, and what we call pleasure is just the fleeting moment when the pain stops. But it never really stops. It just hides for a while, patiently waiting for the moment to return. And it always returns. Always. That's why Schopenhauer said that joy is a pause between sufferings. It's not lasting. It's not solid. It's not real. It's a flash, an illusion, a trick of the will that makes us keep wanting, keep living, keep suffering. If you notice this with absolute brutal honesty, you'll see that most of your life isn't spent feeling genuine pleasure. It's spent desiring things you don't have, suffering from losses, hoping something will improve, fighting against circumstances, chasing goals that seem to escape you. True pleasure is an extremely rare exception. Pain, in its 1,000 different forms, is the constant rule. And we spend our entire lives trying to deny this obvious and painful truth. We create comforting stories about purpose. We invent grandiose meanings where there are none. We constantly distract ourselves with empty entertainment. Everything, absolutely everything. So we don't have to face the brutally simple fact that life, in its most fundamental essence, is much more pain than joy, much more chronic lack than satisfied fullness, much more exhausting struggle than true peace. And the sooner you accept this, the less you'll suffer trying to deny the obvious. And if pain is the absolute rule, then suffering isn't an occasional accident. It's not something that happens from time to time by simple bad luck or isolated misfortune. It's not the result of wrong choices that could have easily been avoided with more wisdom. No, it's the natural and permanent state of conscious existence. Everything that lives, without exception, lives in constant struggle. Plants compete fiercely, silently, for every inch of space and every ray of sunlight. Those that lose this competition die slowly in the shade, suffocated by the winners. Animals hunt so they don't starve and are hunted by bigger predators. They kill violently to eat and live in constant terror of being killed the same way. Human beings, even with all their intelligence and technology, work themselves to complete exhaustion. They fall ill with painful and debilitating diseases. They inevitably age, losing strength, beauty, capacity. They lose the people they love to accidents, diseases, death. They become deeply frustrated with unrealized dreams, wasted potential, lost opportunities. No one escapes this brutal reality. Absolutely no one. It doesn't matter how rich, beautiful, intelligent, talented, or privileged a person is. They'll suffer in ways they can't control. You can have brief moments of apparent truce, rare and precious moments when everything seems relatively well, when there's no immediate crisis, when you can breathe. But pain is always lurking in the shadows, always patiently waiting for its moment, always ready to return with renewed force and remind you that you're not safe. You never were. You never will be. Schopenhauer looked at the world without romantic filters and saw a gigantic and relentless machine of suffering working perfectly, not because of intentional divine cruelty, not because there's a sadistic God who deliberately enjoys seeing us suffer for pleasure, but because of pure cosmic structure, because of involuntary and blind design. The will itself, by manifesting in separate and competitive individual forms, inevitably creates permanent conflict, because each individual being wants to live, wants to grow without limits, wants to dominate its living space, wants to guarantee its survival at any cost. And because physical space is limited, because natural resources are scarce and finite, because there isn't enough room for everyone to live well, life necessarily becomes brutal war. Not an occasional war that arises from misunderstandings, not a temporary conflict that could be avoided with good diplomatic negotiations, but the permanent, structural, and absolutely inevitable condition of material existence. You fight daily against hunger that always returns, against relentless time that ages your body cell by cell, against disease that weakens you and reminds you of fragility, against existential loneliness that corrodes you from within even when you're surrounded by people, against paralyzing boredom that arises when there's nothing urgent to pursue. And even when you finally win a specific battle, there's always another completely different one waiting just ahead, ready to challenge you again. Human existence, seen under this harsh, raw, and brutally honest light, isn't a divine gift. It's a heavy burden, an immense and inescapable weight that you didn't ask to carry, that you didn't choose to take on. And carrying this burden every day, waking up and continuing, fighting and resisting, until you can finally rest permanently in liberating death, is the extremely high price we all pay simply for being alive and conscious. One of the cruelest traps of the will is how it distorts our perception of the value of things. Schopenhauer noticed something we've all felt firsthand, but rarely admit out loud. We tend to intensely desire what we don't have and despise what we've already achieved. Before getting a job, it seems perfect. You imagine how your life will be better when you're there, how you'll be happier, more fulfilled, more complete. But after a few months in the position, it becomes routine. It loses its appeal. And you start looking at other opportunities, thinking that maybe there, yes, you'll find satisfaction. Before winning over a person, they seem unique, special, perfect. You idealize every detail. You imagine a wonderful future together. But after the relationship stabilizes, after the initial passion cools, the shine diminishes, the flaws appear, and you start to wonder if you wouldn't be happier with someone else. Before buying something you've wanted for months, planning and saving, you imagine in detail how absolutely incredible it will be to finally have that in your hands, how it will completely transform your life, how it will make you genuinely happy for a long time. But after you buy it and pay a lot, after you use it a few times, the object inevitably loses all the appeal it had. It gets stored in the back of the closet, gathering dust, forgotten as if it had never been important. And you, without noticing the absurd pattern, are already anxiously eyeing the next purchase, the next empty promise of satisfaction. Why? Why do we do exactly this repeatedly, tirelessly, even knowing deep down in our consciousness that it's going to happen again in the same predictable way? Because the will simply doesn't want you to truly satisfy yourself. It absolutely needs you to keep wanting without stopping. It needs to keep you in perpetual motion, always seeking, never finding. So it deceives you in a brilliant, sophisticated, and completely relentless way. making the distant and unattainable seem incredibly valuable and full of infinite possibilities, and making what's near, what you already have in your hands, seem common, dull, disappointing, insufficient. It's a psychological trap, absolutely perfect in its cruelty. You live imprisoned in a constant and desperate pursuit of something that, when it's finally reached after so much effort, is no longer worth anything. It has completely lost the magical charm it had. It doesn't complete you even remotely as it so intensely promised. And the worst, the most painful of all, is that you know this perfectly. You've lived this idiotic cycle 1,000 times in your life. You've been disappointed 1,000 times by the same lie, but you keep falling for the same transparent illusion, again and again and again, without ever learning. Because the blind will is infinitely stronger than any human reason. It doesn't care in the slightest about what you've learned from past experiences. It doesn't care about what you know intellectually. It only wants one thing, for you to keep desiring eternally, always, without stopping, until you die. If you're enjoying this content, you might also like our exclusive material that's in the first pinned comment. But what about when there's no urgent desire? What happens when all your basic needs are met? When there's nothing urgent to pursue? When you finally have that peace you sought so much? Schopenhauer had a somber and disturbing answer. Boredom arises. And boredom for him is just another face of suffering, a more subtle form, but no less real, of existential pain. Because the human mind wasn't made for rest. It wasn't designed to be at peace. It needs movement, objective, tension, something to do, something to pursue. When this is lacking, when there's no urgent desire pushing you forward, the mind turns inward and finds emptiness. Boredom isn't just lack of fun. It's not just having nothing to do on a rainy Sunday. It's a deep form of existential anguish. It's the absolutely unbearable weight of being conscious without having anywhere to direct this consciousness. It's looking inside yourself and finding nothing solid, nothing permanent, nothing that gives real meaning to existence. That's why people flee from boredom in every possible way. They work too much, far beyond what's necessary, just to avoid stopping. They consume too much, buy things they don't need, just to have something new. They distract themselves too much, jump from one series to another, from one social network to another, from one entertainment to another, in a frenetic and desperate rhythm. Everything to avoid stopping. Everything to avoid being alone with their own thoughts. Because truly stopping and looking inward is unbearable. You see the emptiness. You see the lack of meaning. You see there's nothing in there that can save you. And this frightens deeply. Schopenhauer saw in this a terrible paradox with no way out. When you desire and don't have, you suffer from lack, from the absence, from the distance between you and what you want. But when you don't desire, when you have nothing urgent to pursue, you suffer from emptiness, from lack of purpose, from absence of movement. You're trapped between the pain of lack and the pain of emptiness, between the suffering of wanting and the suffering of not wanting. There's no way out within the logic of the will. There's only suffering in different forms. That's all. Modernity insistently sells us the idea that we're progressing, that each generation lives better than the previous one. That technology, science, the accumulation of material goods and knowledge inevitably lead us to a superior state of happiness and fulfillment. But Schopenhauer would question this with brutal coldness. He would say that what we call progress is just the refinement of the prison, just the decoration of the bars. Because the more you achieve, the more the will demands from you. Before you wanted food to survive. Now you want gourmet food, organic, Instagram-worthy. Before you wanted basic shelter to protect yourself from the cold. Now you want a house with perfect design, in the ideal location, with all modern amenities. Before you just wanted human company, so you wouldn't feel alone. Now you want recognition on social media, likes, followers, constant validation from strangers. The will adapts. It evolves along with society. It always finds new objects of desire, increasingly sophisticated, increasingly distant. increasingly numerous. And the more you feed it, the hungrier it gets, more demanding, more insatiable. Material progress doesn't diminish suffering. It just changes the way we suffer. And maybe it even makes it worse, because now we have infinite options, infinite comparisons, infinite ways to feel inadequate. Before you compared yourself to your neighbors. Now you compare yourself to the entire world through a screen. And there's always someone with more. There's always someone more beautiful, more successful, happier, more fulfilled. Schopenhauer would look at today's world, with all its technology and abundance, and see not freedom, but sophisticated slavery. A prison decorated with colorful screens and empty promises. But still, a prison. And maybe worse than before, because now we have the illusion of choice, the illusion of control. When in reality, we remain as trapped as we've always been, just with more distractions so we don't notice the chains. Love, which so many consider life's most sublime and liberating experience, also didn't escape Schopenhauer's relentless criticism. For him, romantic love isn't freedom. It's not genuine choice. It's not deep spiritual connection. It's a biological trap. It's another way the will manipulates us. The will uses sexual desire, combines it with intense emotional enchantment, and creates what we call passion. That overwhelming sensation of having found the perfect person. That your life only makes sense beside them. That you were made for each other. That this love is different, special, unique, eternal. But it's not. Schopenhauer saw love as an elaborate trick of nature. It makes you believe all these beautiful and poetic things. But in reality, what's really happening is much more mechanical and cold. Your instincts, shaped by millions of years of evolution, identified in that person complementary genetic characteristics to generate healthy offspring. And since nature can't tell you this directly, because you would reject such a crude and utilitarian motivation, it creates the illusion of romance, the illusion of true love, the illusion of the soulmate. You think you're living a fairy tale. You think you're exercising your freedom by choosing to love someone. But in reality, you're just being used by the blind will to perpetuate the species, to create more bodies, more channels through which the will can continue manifesting. And when the passion passes, when the hormones stabilize, when the initial chemistry dissipates, you realize you were deceived, that the person wasn't so perfect after all, that the love wasn't so special, that you idealized everything. But by then, it's too late. You've already committed. You've already built a life together. Maybe you already have children, and the will has already moved on in search of another victim. It's already creating the next illusion, the next romance, the next trap, and someone will fall. Someone always falls. Because the will is stronger than us, and because we desperately want to believe that love is real, that we're not just sophisticated animals following blind instincts. But according to Schopenhauer, that's exactly what we are, and accepting this truth hurts too much. So we prefer the illusion, we prefer the fantasy, we prefer to keep believing, even knowing, deep down, that he might be right. The body is also a fundamental part of this prison. You didn't choose to be born. You didn't choose to have hunger, thirst, sexual desire, pain, tiredness. But you're trapped in a biological organism that constantly demands things from you, that makes you feel needs. That limits you. That ages you. That will eventually fail and kill you. Schopenhauer saw the body as the main instrument through which the will dominates and controls you. Because it's through it that you feel lack. It's through it that you suffer. All physical pain is the will brutally reminding you that you're not in control of your own existence. You can try to ignore hunger, but in a few days, it will bring you down. It will leave you too weak to think about anything else. You can try to ignore sleep, but it will defeat you. It always wins. You can try to deny aging. You can use all available technologies, all treatments, all tricks. But it will consume you. It will weaken your body. It will diminish your capacities. It will bring you closer to death. There's no escape. The body is a heavy and relentless anchor. It ties you to desire. It ties you to time. It ties you to death, and living under its dominion is being a slave. You can have illusions of autonomy. You can think you control your life. You can make long-term plans. You can believe you're free. But just let the body get sick for you to realize who's really in charge. Just one serious illness, one chronic pain, one physical limitation for all your imagined freedom to disappear. And you find yourself reduced to a frightened animal, desperately trying to relieve suffering, unable to think about anything but the pain. And this isn't accidental. It's not bad luck. It's the way the will keeps you trapped. Because as long as you have a body, you'll desire. You'll need to eat. You'll need to sleep. You'll need comfort. You'll need pleasure. And as long as you desire, you'll suffer. You'll feel the pain of lack every time a need isn't immediately satisfied. And since it's impossible to satisfy all needs all the time, it's impossible not to suffer. Suffering isn't a bug in existence. It's the main feature. It's how everything was designed to work. And realizing this is at the same time liberating and terrifying. But Schopenhauer wasn't just a pessimist who pointed out suffering without offering any way out. He believed there was a way to escape, not through the satisfaction of desires, which as we've seen is impossible and only generates more desire, but through their radical denial, renunciation. For him, the only way to find true and lasting peace was to stop wanting, to silence the will, to stop seeking pleasure, success, recognition, love, possessions, to live ascetically, completely detached, contemplatively, simply. This doesn't necessarily mean becoming a monk and living isolated on a mountain. It means radically changing, from the root, your relationship with desire. Stopping identifying your happiness, your worth, your fulfillment with the conquest of external objects. Stopping believing that the next thing, whatever it is, will finally complete you. Stopping chasing. Stopping fighting. Just stopping. Schopenhauer saw in Eastern philosophy, especially in Buddhism, a deep confirmation of his ideas. He was one of the first Western philosophers to take seriously the sacred texts of Buddhism and Hinduism, and he found in them impressive echoes of his own conclusions reached independently. Buddhism speaks of suffering as a direct product of desire and proposes the complete cessation of desire as the only true path to liberation, to nirvana. Schopenhauer said exactly the same thing, just with different words. To free oneself from the will is to free oneself from suffering. They're two faces of the same fundamental truth about existence. But this requires something extremely rare: the courage to abandon the consoling illusion that life can be good, can be full, can be happy, if you just achieve enough, if you just work hard enough, if you just find the right person, if you just earn enough money. This illusion needs to die completely, and letting it die hurts. It hurts more than almost anything else, because without it, without this hope, what remains? There's a way to temporarily escape the will without needing to renounce everything at once. And this way, surprisingly, is art. Schopenhauer saw in genuine aesthetic experience a momentary relief from suffering. Because when you contemplate a true work of art, when you really look at a painting, a sculpture, a breathtaking natural landscape, something changes. You stop desiring. In that moment, you don't want to possess what you're seeing. You don't want to use it. You don't want to transform it into status. You just want to see. You just want to be present. You just want to absorb the experience. And in this act of absolutely pure and disinterested contemplation, the will quiets down, falls silent, stops pushing you. You cease being a subject that wants things and become just an eye that observes, a mirror that reflects without judging. There's no time, there's no lack, there's no pain. There's only the experience of beauty, pure, simple, complete in itself. It's an extremely rare and brief state. It lasts seconds, maybe minutes in the best cases, but it's deeply liberating. It's a glimpse of what life would be like without the will, without constant desire, without endless struggle. That's why Schopenhauer valued true artists so much. Not because they produce beautiful objects that decorate environments, but because they manage, even if just for brief instants, to see the world without the distorted filter of desire, without wanting to use, without wanting to possess, without wanting to transform everything into a means to an end. They see things as they are, in themselves, without projecting needs and wants onto them. And by sharing this through art, through paintings, sculptures, poetry, music, they offer others the chance to experience the same temporary liberation. Art doesn't solve the suffering of existence. It can't. Suffering is too structural to be solved by anything, but art offers a pause, a breath, a moment of truce in the constant war. And in a life dominated by pain, by struggle, by perpetual dissatisfaction, even a brief pause is immensely valuable. It's a reminder that another way of existing is possible, even if just for instance. Even if soon the will returns and pulls you back into the cycle. These instants matter. They're small windows of light in a dark prison. Among all the arts, Schopenhauer considered music the most powerful and fundamental. Because music doesn't represent anything from the material world. It doesn't imitate objects. It doesn't portray landscapes. It doesn't tell stories directly. It directly expresses the very essence of the will. When you hear a symphony, a sonata, a song that touches you deeply, what you feel aren't concrete images or rational ideas. You feel pure movement, tension and resolution, desire and relief, anguish and ecstasy, lack and fullness. You feel the will manifesting in sonic form. That's why music touches so deeply. That's why it crosses all cultural and linguistic barriers. That's why it can make you feel things you didn't even know you were feeling. Because it doesn't speak to your reason. It doesn't try to convince your mind. It speaks directly to the deepest core of your being, to the will that exists in you. And in doing this, it allows you to understand, in a non-conceptual, non-rational, non-verbal way, the true nature of existence. Schopenhauer said that music is the universal language of the will, and that's why it's capable of expressing things that words can never reach. Words are limited, concepts are limited, but music flows, moves, captures the unspeakable. When you listen to a profoundly sad melody, you're not just hearing sounds organized in a certain way. You're feeling the pain of the world, the universal suffering of everything that lives. When you listen to a joyful melody, you feel the illusion of pleasure, the false promise that life can be light. Music is philosophy without concepts. It's pure emotional truth, and that's why it's so powerful, so essential, so dangerous too, because it can both liberate and imprison, depending on how you use it. If you use it to contemplate, to understand, to have that moment of pause from the will, it liberates. But if you use it as one more distraction, as one more way to flee from yourself, to avoid the emptiness, then it traps you even more. Like everything in life, it depends on the consciousness with which you relate to it. Suffering isn't exclusive to human beings. Schopenhauer courageously expanded his vision to the entire animal kingdom. He saw the will acting in every living being, from the smallest insect to the largest elephant. All struggle, all suffer, all desire, all are trapped in the same cycle. Nature isn't a place of romantic harmony, as some want to believe. It's not Bambi's peaceful kingdom. It's a bloody battlefield where each species devours the other to survive, where each individual is in constant and brutal competition with all others. Schopenhauer looked at the natural world without illusions and saw mirrors of human suffering in all directions. The bird singing in the tree in the morning isn't celebrating life. It's not expressing joy for existence. It's defending territory. It's warning other males to stay away. It's trying to attract females to reproduce. It's all survival, all necessity, all blind will. The lion hunting in the savannah isn't fulfilling a noble purpose. It's not playing its role in the circle of life. It's just obeying the blind will that pushes it to kill so it won't starve. And the gazelle that flees is desperate, terrified, fighting for survival with every fiber of its being. There's no innocence in this process. There's no deep beauty. There's no peace. There's only will devouring itself, literally, in infinite different forms. The predator devours the prey devoured plants, the plants devour nutrients from the soil, Everything eats, everything is eaten, in a macabre and meaningless dance that's been repeating for millions of years. And this should make us seriously question the common idea that life is a gift, that existing is good. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's a mistake, a cosmic accident that generates meaningless suffering. And maybe the most courageous thing is to admit this, to look at reality without the consoling filters, and decide what to do from this naked and hard truth. But if everything suffers, if all living beings are trapped in the same cruel and blind will, then there's something deep that connects us. And this something is compassion. Schopenhauer saw empathy, the capacity to feel another's pain as if it were your own, not as moral virtue in the traditional sense. Not as something you should do because God commands or because society approves, but as pure lucidity, as direct perception of truth. When you feel genuine compassion for someone, what's really happening at a deep level is that you recognize in that person the same suffering that exists in you. You see through the superficial illusion of separation. You realize that, deep down, we're all manifestations of the same single will, and we all suffer under the same relentless yoke. There's no real difference between you and the other. They're just different forms of the same essence. Compassion, then, isn't kindness in the sense of you being generous with someone inferior. It's recognition. It's the clear perception that the other isn't truly other. It's you, under another form, under another body, under other circumstances, but fundamentally the same. And therefore, when you alleviate someone's suffering, you're not just doing a favor. You're alleviating the suffering of the world. You're reducing, even if minimally, the total pain that exists. Schopenhauer saw in this the only genuinely moral action, not because it follows rules, not because it guarantees you future reward in heaven, but because it's the natural and inevitable response of someone who truly understood the human condition, of someone who truly saw the truth about suffering. Helping the other is realizing that, in essence, there's no difference between you and them. Both are temporary prisoners of the same blind force. Both are destined to suffer as long as they live, and both deserve compassion, including yourself, maybe especially yourself, because the tendency is to be hard on yourself, to demand from yourself, to judge yourself. But if you understand that you're trapped in a machine of suffering that you didn't ask to enter, maybe you can look at yourself with more gentleness, with more understanding, with more forgiveness. The true sage, for Schopenhauer, isn't the one who conquered everything. It's not the billionaire. It's not the famous one. It's not the powerful one. It's the one who stopped wanting. It's the one who realized the race is useless and consciously stopped running. He doesn't seek success because he knows success is illusion. He doesn't seek romantic love because he knows love is a trap of the will. He doesn't seek pleasure because he knows pleasure is just temporary pause from pain. What he seeks is inner silence, serene contemplation, deep serenity. He lives in an extremely simple way, completely detached, without great ambitions, without grandiose plans, without urgent desires. And in this radical simplicity, he finds a peace that others never know. Because while most people chase endless desires, the sage has already understood the fundamental truth. The only path to stop suffering is to stop desiring. And to stop desiring, you need to stop believing that something external can complete you. This doesn't mean giving up on life in a depressive way. It doesn't mean becoming apathetic or nihilistic. It means living without being a slave to existence. It means doing what needs to be done, fulfilling your responsibilities, but without emotionally attaching yourself to the results, without depending on them to feel good, without creating expectations that will inevitably disappoint you. Schopenhauer saw this ideal of the detached sage as the highest a human being can achieve. It's not easy. It's not simple. It's not something you decide one day and achieve the next. It's extremely rare. Maybe only a few people in all of history have truly succeeded, but it's possible. And for those who succeed, life stops being constant suffering and becomes just existence, neutral, calm, without great pains, without great joys either, but without pain. And maybe that's enough. Maybe it's even a lot, considering the alternative is to suffer until you die. Schopenhauer didn't hide his deep intellectual debt to the East. He was one of the first Western philosophers to absolutely take seriously the sacred Buddhist and Hindu texts, to study them with respect, to incorporate their ideas honestly, and he found in them impressive echoes of his own conclusions. The Buddhist concept of dukkha, the suffering inherent in existence, was exactly what he saw when looking at the world. The idea that desire, called tanha in Buddhism, is the fundamental root of all pain, was central both in Buddhism and in his philosophy of the will, and the proposal of complete cessation of desire as the only true path of liberation was also identical. Schopenhauer said that Buddhist nirvana, that state of absolute peace achieved through total extinction of desire and the individual self, was exactly the same as the complete denial of the will. Both pointed to a state where the individual self completely dissolves, where wanting ceases, where peace finally becomes possible because there's no one there anymore to suffer. He deeply admired Eastern wisdom precisely because it didn't try to sugarcoat the pill. It didn't try to make life seem better than it is. It looked at existence head-on, without fear, without denial, and said with brutal clarity, yes, existence is suffering. Yes, life hurts. Yes, you're trapped in a cycle that has no meaning, and there's only one true way out. Stop clinging to it. Stop wanting it to be what it's not. Stop fighting against reality. This, for Schopenhauer, was infinitely more honest than any Western religion that promised future reward in heaven, or hidden divine meaning, or cosmic justice that would eventually correct everything. It was the naked truth, raw, hard to swallow, but truth, and he immensely respected that. Schopenhauer's pessimism is often misunderstood by most people. Many think he was just a bitter, resentful, depressed philosopher who hated life and wanted to contaminate everyone with his negative vision. But he saw his pessimism in a completely different way. For him, it was radical lucidity. It was the immense courage to look at reality exactly as it is, without the consoling filters of religion, conventional morality, the illusory hope sold by society. Most people live in deep denial. They invent comforting stories about life purpose, special destiny, divine justice that eventually rewards the good. They do this because the naked truth is unbearable. It's too heavy. It hurts too much. Schopenhauer chose not to flee from this pain. He chose to face the world as it really is. A blind machine of suffering, without ultimate meaning, without guaranteed redemption, without promised happy ending. And he firmly believed that only from this brutally honest acceptance was it possible to find some kind of genuine wisdom. Because while you live from illusions, you remain trapped in them. You keep hoping life will magically improve, that the next desire will finally complete you, that everything will make sense in the end. But when you truly accept that there's no ultimate meaning, that there's no possible completeness, that pain is structural and not accidental, you finally stop fighting against reality. And paradoxically, in this acceptance, you find peace, not the peace of radiant happiness, but the peace of serene acceptance, of stopping resisting, of stopping demanding that life be different from what it is. And maybe this is the only truly possible peace. The only peace that doesn't depend on external circumstances. The only peace no one can take from you. But then the final question remains, the most difficult and frightening of all. What's left when you stop desiring? When you completely silence the will? When you renounce pleasures, ambitions, dreams, plans, everything that makes life recognizable? What remains? Schopenhauer said, with disturbing simplicity, that nothingness remains. But he didn't see this as something negative or terrifying, because nothingness, for him, wasn't absence of life in the sense of death. It was absence of suffering, and in an existence where suffering is the norm, where pain is the default condition, nothingness is true liberation. But this raises a deep tension that he honestly recognized. Is it worth living without desiring? Is a life without passion, without constant pursuit, without wanting, really life? Or is it just a form of death in life? an empty and colorless existence. Schopenhauer didn't offer easy or comforting answers to these questions. He knew perfectly well that the overwhelming majority of people wouldn't be able to follow this path, and maybe they shouldn't even try. Because completely renouncing the will is renouncing almost everything that makes human life recognizable. It's giving up love, success, fun, hope, deep relationships, achievements, everything. And few have the stomach for this. Few can really live like this. But he offered the option. He placed the path before you, and he said clearly, if you truly want to stop suffering for real, not just diminish suffering but eliminate it completely, this is the only possible path. You decide if the price is worth it. Schopenhauer didn't ask you to blindly agree with him. He didn't want to create obedient disciples. He asked for something much more difficult and valuable, that you look at your own life with radical honesty, that you realize, without deceiving yourself, how many times you've already intensely desired something, achieved it, and felt the emptiness return right after. How many times you deluded yourself thinking the next thing would be different. That this time, yes, you would find lasting satisfaction. How many times you desperately suffered for not having something, and then, when you finally had it, you suffered from having lost it, or from seeing it wasn't what you imagined. He asked you to recognize this cycle in your own experience, that you stop denying, that you stop making excuses, and from this honest recognition, that you make your conscious choice. Keep chasing endless desires, knowing you'll never truly satisfy yourself, but at least maintaining the illusion that you're going somewhere. Or stop completely, accept the emptiness, and find peace in radical renunciation, but paying the price of a life without the color and movement that desire brings. There's no absolute right or wrong. There are only different paths, and each one leads to a radically different type of life. But if you choose to keep desiring, at least do it with your eyes completely open, knowing exactly what you're doing, knowing that each desire carries with it the inevitable seed of suffering, and that the full and lasting happiness you seek may never arrive. Maybe it's impossible by nature, because desiring, in the end, is suffering, and living, inevitably, is desiring. As long as there's life, there's will, and where there's will, there's pain. If you've made it this far, it's because something in these disturbing ideas touched deep, and that matters a lot. It means you're not running away, that you're willing to look at uncomfortable truths. If you want to keep exploring deep questions like this, subscribe to the channel and leave your like. There's much more philosophy, much uncomfortable reflection, much uncomfortable truth waiting for you here. And maybe, together, we can look at life head-on, without paralyzing fear, without comforting illusion, just with the courage to see what it really is. And who knows, in this clear vision, find some form of true peace.